Hello and welcome back to the next video in our distance learning series. This is going to be kind of part two of this week's introduction into exponential logarithms. And for this video, we're going to be purely talking about logarithms and just some of the properties that they have. Okay, the methods you're going to see here not only going to be useful next week when we get into more solid equations with logarithms and exponentials, but later on in calculus, this is super useful when you get into the first semester of calculus. As always, good idea to have a piece of paper and something to write with, to write some of these things down. Particularly, I mean, just on this next screen, because we're going to be using these on the assignment that's attached with this one. So I'm going to jump right in here. So we're going to talk about three different rules, three different properties. The one thing to keep in mind is they do work with any base. So I'm just going to have the general rule up here, but whether it's a common log or a natural log or whatever base, these are going to be the standard rules for all of them. So the first rule is called the product rule. And what this says is if you have something being multiplied together inside of a logarithm, then we can separate that out by adding two separate logarithms with the individual arguments. Okay, it'll make some more sense when you start doing some examples, but that's called the product rule. So if you start with multiplying, separate them out, expand them by adding. The second one is the quotient rule, and take a wild guess. If the first one was multiplying and then separating them out by adding, if I'm dividing, how do you think I'm going to separate them? You are correct. We're going to subtract them. So if we have a quotient inside of a logarithm, now we're going to separate these out by subtracting the two individual logs. Okay? And then the third rule is what we call the power rule. So this one says if you have any power inside of a logarithm, well, we can actually rewrite that n, that power, whatever it is, can just come right in front. And so that would be written as n times log m. Okay? So if you haven't, please take a moment, pause the video, write these things down, because we're definitely going to be needing these as we do the examples. So the first way I'm going to do is kind of the normal direction, I guess. That's not really a good word to use, but going from one logarithm, and I want to expand these things. Okay, so there's usually going to be more than one property to apply. Sometimes you have to apply all three of them. But let's take a look at an example here. So as we go through these things, I'm also going to be giving you what I call kind of pro tips. As something that you probably figure out on your own eventually, but I want you guys to get good at these quickly and kind of have fun with these. So the first kind of pro tip when you're expanding is apply the power rule last. It usually makes life a little bit easier. So let's take a look at our first example. So we got log of x squared y to the third. Well, notice we're multiplying these guys together, so I can separate them out with two separate logs by adding them. So I can write that as log x squared plus log of y to the third. And now use your power rule. Remember the power rule said that any exponent can just come right in front. So that 2 would come in front, the 3 would come in front of that log, and we can write it as 2 log x plus 3 log y. And that's going to be your final answer, folks. When we're expanding, we just want to get it as simple as possible. It is going to be a lot of terms, but just kind of one by one, each individual thing gets its own logarithm. Okay? How about this example? So now I've got ln, remember that's just natural log, of a to the fifth over b squared. So again, let's apply the quotient rule since we're dividing these things. So each thing gets its own logarithm, but now we're going to separate it out with a minus sign. So we have ln a to the fifth minus ln b squared. And now applying the product rule, the power rule. So the 5 comes in front of the ln, the 2 comes in front of the ln. So I'd write that as 5 ln a minus 2 ln b. And again, that's going to be your final answer. Okay. Now I'm going to give you one more. I'm going to ask you to pause the video. This is going to be a longer one with all three rules at once, but I want to see if you can figure it out just right off the bat. So before I show, so here's the problem. And notice I gave you a pro tip number 2. So if you have more than one thing going on, your second tip here is anything on top, you're going to separate that by adding, and anything on the bottom will get separated by subtraction. Okay, so pause the video, see if you can do this on your own, even though we've only been doing it for a minute or so. See if you can work that out by yourself. Okay, so again, first off, separate everything out. So everything's going to get its own log base 3. Okay, so it's a long one, but everything got log base 3 of a squared plus log base 3 of b plus c to the 7th, and then the 2 things on the bottom. Now that 5 is its own thing too, because I'm still multiplying 5 times the x to the 4th. So I get minus log base 3 of 5 minus log base 3 of x to the 4th. Okay. Now I've got all of that done. Now I can just bring all of the powers in front of each individual log. Okay. So I've got the 2 that's going to come in front, the 7 is going to come in front, and then the 4 is going to come in front. Notice there's no power on the b or the 5, so they're just going to stay the same. So your final answer would just be that. So 2 log base 3 of a plus log base 3 of b plus 7 log base 3 of c minus log base 3 of 5 minus 4 log 3 of x. Okay, so that's all there is to expanding log expressions. So everything gets its own logarithm as you go through there. How about going the other direction? Well, we call that condensing. Okay, and again, just like before, there's usually going to be more than one property to apply. Here's another pro tip for you. Remember that even though the problem might look kind of hideous and long, it's going to end up as a single log. Okay, and then the second one on this one, we're going to kind of do this backwards. So I would recommend doing the power rule first and then kind of going from there. Okay, so here's your first example. So I got 5 log x plus 6 log y. Let's do the power rule. So again, any coefficient becomes a power. So this is going to be x to the 5th, and this is going to be y to the 6th. So all I'm going to do in the first step. And now you say to yourself, oh, okay, I'm adding, so how can I combine this into a single log? Well, if I'm adding, I'm going to combine them by multiplying. So a single logarithm of x to the 5th times y to the 6th, and that's it. Okay, and that is your condensing of that initial problem. How about this one? So I got 1/2 ln c minus 7 ln d. What would I do first? Again, do the power rule. So bring the 1/2 as power, and then bring the 7 as a power. And then you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm subtracting now, so how do I combine those? And again, if I'm going backwards, if I'm subtracting, that means I'm making it into a fraction and dividing the quotient rule. So it's going to be ln of root c over d to the 7th. Now, if you remember, why did I write root c? Because that's 1/2 power. 1/2 power means square root, so that's where that came from. Okay. Last example on condensing will be this. So again, there's a big long one. Here's my last pro tip too. Remember, just like we said before, anything adding, you're going to put that in the numerator of your quotient. Anything being subtracted is going to be that down to the denominator of your fraction. But watch out for parentheses. These can be a little bit tricky sometimes, kind of making sure you get everything in the right place. So again, apply the power rule first. So the 4 comes up to the power, 7's the power, 5's the power. So we're going to have that. And now when we combine these things, again, adding, these 2 guys are going to be on top. And then these 2 guys, notice that negative sign is going to distribute to both of these places, right? So that's going to be a minus, and that's going to be a minus. So both of these are going to be in the bottom. So I'm going to write logarithm one time. So log of the two guys on top that are adding, a to the fourth, b to the seventh, and then the bottom, 9x to the fifth. And that's it. That's your final answer. Okay? So the second assignment this week is just going to be using those properties. Okay? I'm going to put them up here as this last screen. If you haven't written them down yet, make sure and write them down because you'll need them for that second assignment. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to share this video if you know anybody else currently going through some log properties and if they have any questions. Stay well, take care of each other, take care of yourselves. And again, please reach out to me if you have any questions or I can do anything for you at all. Until the next time, keep studying.